Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. It's 3:03. We're gonna go ahead and call this special meeting of the governance committee to order. Darren will keep me honest, not just in time, but like in what we're going to accomplish today, because we're getting to the finish line. So it is very much, excuse me, a bit of crunch time. A couple things are probably important just to kind of keep us moving forward. So one, Darren and I took some time after the working session to try to compile and put things in one place. And we wanted to have this meeting to give the opportunity for the committee to lift up some things that we agree upon to be able to put out both to the rest of the members and the public based on the conversation, not just, everything that led up into the conversation at the working session, and then the conversation at the working session. So Maria and Darren, am I missing anything? But that is our purpose. So what we did was we actually updated the shared document that we had been using. And I think the best thing for us to do is probably for us to share that and begin to talk through it, like recommendation by recommendation. I think we ended up around like 8 or 9 that tried to incorporate the conversations. Yeah. And so we'll just take those like one by one, see if there's anything that's missing from that, if there's nothing that will like kill us. I know Representative Parker is not currently on the line, but he recommended that like we could vote. That way we can figure out which ones to include in the committee recommendation. I'm totally comfortable with that, just to keep it clear. And I know that's what some committees have done in the past. And so we will vote on each one. And then that's what will make it out of committee. So Darren, could you share the screen with the shared recommendations?
Sure, and I shared a link as well in the chat.
Okay, perfect.
Is this? Can you all see this?
Yes, I can. I'm also logging in the chat.
And I appreciate Dan and Serena also jumping in and providing their comments and feedback.
Okay, yes, perfect. I didn't know that had happened yet. All right. So I don't know if people want like a minute just to read through this clearly. Read through this quickly, or if it's helpful to just jump in since we're going to read them one by one.
Are they the same as what we saw before? Or they changed since we last saw them?
They're similar. So they have changed since the working session because we went through the working session notes and tried to incorporate feedback in. So there are some changes.
No, I mean, since I guess last night is when we were supposed to get our stuff in. Has it changed since that?
I am not sure unless I'm not sure when Dan and Serena's feedback came in, so I don't want to.
I don't think anything has changed since last night. Oh, you know what? I think if you want to read this, I'll check my email. I think actually Dan added something.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that I generally had in my head what was there. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. So that sounds like we should not take a couple minutes to read through. We can just kind of lift them up one by one. I'm going to take that as a yes. And then just for visibility, I'll go ahead and read which one we're talking about. So the first recommendation, hey, Bernice, I see a hand.
I'm sorry, I just realized not quite sure. I pressed the wrong button. Go forth.
Oh.
I will lower my hand. I was trying to do something else on the screen. My apologies.
No worries. Welcome to Zoom world. the first recommendation is expand the state board's authority to request data from DC's education agencies. It says DME, OXI, and PCSB. I want to add that it does recognize that there would be some capacity needed. So it does have $3 signs next to it. And there's some notes now. So data request requires a 10-day turnaround time, including data cleaning and de-identification. Because we initially had a question of should this have probably some parameters or timeline around it. So that is the first one. Are there immediate thoughts around this one?
I do, and I'm sorry, I can't, because I'm in the car, I don't have access to my raised hand, so should I just jump in?
Yes, that's why I said, are there
Okay,
thoughts?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Two quick
Blackmore.
things. One, and I think I put a note in there. I'm not sure why this would be $3 signs. It seems to me it's not that it's we can get the information, and so committees can get their hands on information, and I'm not sure why it's $3 signs. So that's one point. And then the other is just to clarify, or are we leaving it ambiguous as to whether it's just for information relevant to our statutory authorities or the various issues that we're involved in?
Well, I think so. Let me start with the first one because that's easier. Or it's more clear. I have the full context. We are anticipating a need for our staff to be able to do something with the data. So we would want more just staff capacity around making the data useful and transparent to the public. And we recognize that we currently went through, we're currently going through a budget for out years. And we would also need to go through budget for out years. So that's why there is cost reflected here. Just so we can, it's a recognition of need to build our capacity and recognizing that would not happen in months, that would happen in years just based on the budget cycle.
So I'm just going to say, I think there's a big difference between having access to it on an as needed basis and a whole bunch of other stuff. And I'm for the whole bunch of other stuff. I also think that in the short term, it doesn't need to be years. It can be, if the council decided to vote on it, it could be swift. And for very specific needs, say we wanted to get information on teacher retention, as we did several years ago.
Maybe I should clarify. I'm only going to cut you off because I think I understand where you're going with this. The recommendation is, so it's not saying that once the council voted, we couldn't have access in the short term. We're saying that the time to accomplish the capacity part would be years. Like the once we would have, because we asked the staff what they look through and note where we would want additional capacity to be able to realize the full opportunity of something like being able to deal with the data, that would require years out. And so maybe we can put here some distinction between when this might be effective as far as when we could start to receive versus when we would in real life be able to add more staff, which is what is part of this request. But the years was reflective of the adding staff requests based on the budget cycles. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and I think your idea of making the distinction is important. Like there's a short term that's months and there's a long term that's something else. And I think that really is important to make, because in the short term, to get some immediate access when we need it on specific things, we should want that and get that soon, and continue to push for the longer term stuff and the longer term capacity. So yes, agreed.
Okay. So we can clarify that. Bernice, is that a on purpose hand or accidental hand?
On purpose. I just wanted to add to that. And I also want to clear, like access to data and expanding the state board's authority are two different recommendations. And so if there's a recommendation to talk about having access, I think that is separate than expanding the state board's authority, because those are two things that can be accomplished separately. Because they can give you access tomorrow. I mean, if the council decides to put it on the agenda, but in terms of expanding the authority to be able to request, because right now, I don't know if it's, maybe I'm understanding what the concept of expanded authority, because you can request data now, whether or not they give
But
it.
we don't get it. No, but we don't, well, we can request it, but we don't get it. So this would be authority. That is, we request you give. So it is a governance change. That's why it would have to go through the
Mhm.
council. That's how I
Like
would see it
technically
anyway.
now, we could request and we do have access and, but we have access, or we can request access. I think this recommendation more so speaks to, the desire to be able to request and it be required, that we receive.
Okay,
Right, because in the past, there have been a number of situations where we've asked for specific kinds of information and data and we've been denied.
So maybe the key word, and Ebony and Rose and I talked about this, is like adding something in like bylaws around they shall provide data. Like
Yeah,
the
maybe it's
request.
like expand, the
Upon
state board's
request.
authority, to request data, which shall be provided or something. Like we can fix the language, but I want to make sure, because I
I
know we
understand.
have like 10 here,
We can keep
and
going.
I want to get through as many as possible. I want to make sure we're on the same page as much as possible. The spirit of this one, noting that two things, we need to clean up the language around to make clear that we're desiring the power to initiate and require. And we are distinguishing between, yes, the power can be granted immediately after some type of legislative change, but we also desire that to be coupled with an increased capacity, which would mean budget provisions in out years. Yes. If there's nothing else, or if that captures, do we feel comfortable?
Yeah. The
Sorry.
one other thing is the range of information. In other words, somebody had proposed that it should just be for those issues for which we have statutory capacity, and I would say it should be for the issues that we are working on. No, it's not just, oh, today I wake up and I would like information on X, but insofar as we're working on an issue, like we're working on teacher turnover or sexual assault, that we could we could request and get that information.
Well, there's nothing here that says statutory capacity.
So that's fine. I just want that's fine. Then
No,
it's fine the
I'm
way
just
it is.
giving that voiceover because I know you're in the car. So I want to know, so you know what's in front of us, because I'm assuming you're not driving and reading this word from word.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, so
So
I'm just giving that voiceover. Okay. So can I ask, Representative Patterson, I know you're trying to do all your jobs. Are we comfortable with that first recommendation, given the updates we'll need to make, but the spirit of the first recommendation? Representative Wattenberg, it sounds
Yeah.
like yes. Representative Patterson, I got a thumbs up. All right, we're gonna move on to the second one. Thank you all. The state board shall have the authority to initiate policies in the areas in which it currently has approval authority and to amend policies brought to the board by OSSI. This one also has, is something that we're saying the timeline of the horizon would be months. We are in the notes section. It says following a board resolution to initiate and amend policy to assure engagement about the issues and feasibility, OSSI will have a set period of time in which to respond with recommendations and options. The board will then prepare, prepare and vote on a final recommendation. We see this as not needing a bunch of additional costs. We don't think we need like additional staff for this. but that's the voiceover of what's here. Curious for reactions.
That sounds fine to me. I do think actually more than the other one, this requires some, I mean, some additional capacity in the sense of if we're gonna be, if a committee says we want to initiate a change on this, you would have to make that case, so that would be some staff, and more than one dollar sign, maybe two.
Okay, so we envision needing different staff capacity for this.
Well,
Um,
it would suggest,
No, go ahead.
I mean, it would suggest that we're being involved at an earlier level, so I would think that it would mean that more so frankly than getting the information, getting the data. And I guess a lot of this is sort of what's in our head, so it's not something I want to make a big deal about, but it strikes me that way.
Okay, I think I was more reiterating to make sure I'm hearing what you're saying as opposed to as a criticism, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Other thoughts around this one, if any? Okay, so assuming we need to flesh out a little bit more if there are capacity needs around this or additional capacity, reflecting better our capacity needs around this. The spirit of this, though, the board shall have the authority to initiate policy and amend policies brought by OSSI, again, within our current approval authority, is something it sounds like we as a committee can agree to. Can I ask just for people to weigh in with a yay or nay around this, or a thumbs up around this second recommendation?
Yay.
Yay, okay,
From
I'm
Ruth.
on board too. Okay. Rep. Patterson? All right, another thumbs up. Perfect. Moving on to number 3. The state board shall approve the opening, closing, and citing of schools. This would is something that could be enacted immediately with legislation. Excuse me, I have a cough, but I'm not like sick, so that's a thing. It's just one of those lingering things. The state board shall approve the opening, closing, and citing of schools. I would note that it just says schools. It is not. It's not just public or just charter. And there's a note that we would probably need some additional capacity here around probably like the planning, like some of the planning functions and review functions that this will require. Are there thoughts around this one?
I just have a question.
Yes.
So for this particular one, is there any phase-in process to this? Because I would just think that it says months, but I anticipate this could potentially be longer. But if it's built in, it's like the state board shall be made aware of at least so many days in advance, like 30, 60, 90, however you want to, days you want to say, before a decision to close the school, so that we can inform the public, they can get public feedback, that kind of thing. Because this is going to be hard to sell to partners, as we shall have approval over authority they already have, and having to be someone to build relationships with these people. Because I think once these recommendations are out there, it makes it a little bit harder to do that. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. I also think a couple things. One, the first question I asked before getting to the place where this recommendation was created was what is legally required, and the state board is actually the only other place outside of the state board can have, based on the congressional or federal law approval authority. And this was in response to the idea that those things need to be situated in one place and not like different separate tracks. As far as like DCPS has one set of plans, and then charters have their own set of plans, or charter LEAs have their own set of plans. I would assume that there would be some type of transition around this in Horizon, like, okay, yeah, you could say effective this date, the state board does this, but there's a lot of information that exists that would need to be passed on. And this would mean a change in authority for the PCSB and the PCSB and the mayor's administration, really, is where these things currently live. And I do think some type of Horizon transition plan would be needed or necessary. And I'm wondering if, kind of like how Representative Wattenberg brought up in the question one around the clarity of like when a change could be made versus when the capacity might be fully realized. If there's something more substantial that we need to, or more nuance we need to create with this column in particular, when we think about those things. But that would be, those are my initial thoughts. I'm curious if other members have thoughts about this recommendation.
This is Ruth. A couple of things. So one of the things that I think we need, and I'm hoping this is part of the plan, is there needs to be a rationale for these different recommendations. And I think that speaks a bit to what Bernice is saying. In other words, if all we have is a list of, we should have the authority to do this, this, and this, it's sort of like, we got our dukes up and we're ready to go. And why are we saying it? I think the rationale on this is the city is in a situation where decisions are made on this in these separate places in a vacuum, without a master facilities plan, without stakeholder input for the most part. And that's really, frankly, what needs to change. And I totally agree with what Representative Thompson was saying about it needs to be in one place. It needs to be connected to a plan. I think it would be great to have it handled by the state board, but it should be handled by the people who are handling this to some extent, the master facilities plan. But that's too much to get into. And I think part of what we need to make clear in this resolution is here's our rationale for changing a set of things. This is something that should be changed for the X reason. And, the board would be one, the board or the council, I guess, should sign off on these. And there should be a process. And maybe it's somebody, either the board or the council needs to sign off on this, and the board should be involved in offering, great weight recommendations. I could see it that way too.
I actually like that last piece around the board being offering great weight recommendations. I think that seems more feasible. But I'm also not going to hold you guys up, because what I should have done, as I'm realizing going through this, if I should have made my comments, whereas Dan and Serena made their comments, and my apologies, to not have done that already. So I am going to limit my comments and let this be for the state board members. But there are just two other points I'd like to make, because I do have to hop off at 3:30. And I'm sorry for changing your agenda, Vice President Thompson. I'm so sorry. I will get better at these as time goes on. I promise you, I'll be much more in line with Darren and more clear on my expectations. I was like, wait, seems like I am interceding in a time that was not for me. So I apologize. But the two things I just wanted to just raise flags about a little bit was one, and it brought to mind with this, if we add something around a rationale or capacity to want to do these things, is to think about, I know you guys are stretching, this has been going to the end, do y'all have to get this done by this week? Is there like a leeway to, because I just feel like we're gonna run into some things around public comment and adding these additional pieces and understanding staff capacity. I'm just not quite sure what that all looks like, because this is a lot to get feedback on. And wanting to give people enough time to do that, to like provide their feedback and for our staff to translate it and all these other things, which take time. So that's one for you all to consider. And then when it comes to this language around local board, I just want us to be very, I don't know if we need to find other language, but that may become very confusing for others. Like, well, we got a local board, that's our state board. And I don't know how we want to do that framing so that it doesn't confuse people, because it can become a very tricky place for people. Like, we know what the state board is and how that is different from a local school board, but other people in the ecosystem may not fully understand how that is different, since they already muddled about who does what. And so just trying to be really intentional about finding other language to explore, to consider when you say the words community board or local board, because it could just get very confusing to like other people that's not us.
Yeah, and maybe I should have better clarified what this document is. I do not think of this document as the end all be all. This document was designed to remove all of the other things and only include where we have gotten to with the takeaway feedback, I mean, with the recommendation feedback. That does not mean that, and I would agree with you all that things need like context and rationale. You can't just say, list the things we want. But this document was created to capture where we had landed on that, because there had not been a document like that previously. So that's the first thing. Second thing, given that this is not what I would call a communications document, it does not have that lens of like public friendly language. And that's also probably not a filter we will place on this today, but totally hear why local board, state board, for people just interacting with our education system, that probably is not helpful language to use. Okay.
One thing I would just say to what Bernice said, and also to some extent to what Ebony Rose has said, I mean, part of what I think this is, and we want to make clear, it's sort of it's an initial set of recommendations based on what we've heard, dealing, responding to certain needs with certain rationale. And we understand that following this, there's going to be a conversation with all kinds of stakeholders and other people in the governance environment that we work in. And so these aren't fine, these are our first best, and they should be, well considered, strongly felt recommendations, but it's not us. We understand that following this will be a discussion. This is a starting point for conversations. I think that's an important point to make. And it's also part of why I wonder about saying this stuff about the capacity and how many years, because all of that's going to be part of a conversation. Maybe, there'll be one staff person who just does data, but maybe there'll be one person who does two things and a third person who does something else. So trying to find the right grain size here is important, and I might not include those details. And I certainly would say that this is what we hope is an opening for a discussion that we hope to move in the council this coming year.
Okay, so I'm going to take us back to recommendation 3. And ask, as far as the spirit of this, and like the idea that this is where we would like this authority to rest, is that part correct? Or are,
I mean, the way I would frame it is, I mean, personally, I would frame it as this authority, somebody that is citywide, whether it's the council or the board, should have the authority to approve open, close decisions. We're open for discussion on that. And one way or the other, the board should have great weight in approving it,
so the
or
great
making a
way,
recommendation on it.
can we, so I want to note that number 4 is that the state board shall be afforded great weight in all governmental agency decisions impacting schools, students, and education stakeholders, because essentially, like ANCs, they're afforded great weight in all governmental decisions. So I think that's the shift we're hoping to make, period. And I guess I would be curious why the council and not the state board for number 3. If it's our perfect world that we're constructing, I'll say my thought here is the board is actually, while the council is also an elected body, the board is an elected body to deal with education matters. And similar to the mayor, who is an elected official, who's elected on a range of issues, the council is already also elected on a range of issues. And so I think concentrating, from my perspective, education decisions with people who are elected to education roles helps with clarity and accountability. And that way people aren't weighing. I like their position on, I don't know, public safety with, do I or do I not like their position on education? So for me, the state board is more perfect for that reason.
Well,
I'm
I
curious if
agree with you.
others- Yeah,
I'll just say, I agree with you in principle. I think it also belongs with whoever's handling the master facilities plan and the planning. You know, it's part and parcel of that. So I wouldn't vote against it for that reason, but I think it's it raises the question, and that's why I posed it the way I did. I think, again, that would need to be part of a rationale. Why are you then putting it at the board? And one reason is because there should be kind of stakeholder input and votes by people who really know the education terrain in their area. So that's a total yes, and I think that can be the rationale. That it's not part of the MFP, that would be a counter argument, but we don't have to deal with every counter argument here. So just wanted to say that.
that makes me wonder if part of the question too, like I am assuming almost like dominoes, right? Like you move one piece, it move, other things shift and move around. I know that currently the conversation with the MFP is between the council and the DME. I do wonder if some of that might shift, or if we would want some of that to shift. If some of these recommendations were true. And maybe we don't need to answer that today, but I do just think of it as a wondering. Yeah. Representative Patterson, I don't know if you had anything either in the chat, or if this is not a great time to call on you.
No, ma'am.
Okay. Representative Wattenberg, were you chiming in again? I think I interrupted you.
No, I guess the one thing I would say is maybe you put that in the recommendation that we think the board should be involved in the more fully in the MFE process, ending with a, having some approval rights on the open close decision. Anyway, I'm trying to offer some of what I think would be good rationale, nuance, explanation. I'm happy, I'm fine with the recommendation. I'm just trying to think about what others will say and how to prepare for that in the context of the resolution. So that's all I'm trying to do.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we do have notes happening as well. So much appreciated. Given that, I'm gonna ask, number 3, is this one we want to advance out of the committee? All in favor, give a thumbs up, say yay, or put something in the chat now.
Yay from Ruth.
Yay. We have 2. I don't know if it's 3, but I know we have 2, which means we can likely advance. Number 4, the state board shall be afforded great weight in all government agency decisions impacting schools, students, and education stakeholders. We see this as something that can happen immediately. We don't really see this as something that will require more capacity. We did note that this would be similar to the great weight already afforded to advisory neighborhood commissioners. Thoughts around this recommendation?
Thumbs up, nothing to add.
And I know Representative Patterson, this was one you raised, and I definitely support as a understanding what that means as a former ANC. So if there is no additional context discussion needed, I'm thinking we can go ahead and say yes to advance this one out of the committee. I heard a thumbs up from Ruth. I'm gonna give my thumbs up. Representative Patterson, I don't know if you want to give a thumbs up or put one in the chat. Okay. All right, I'm going to move us to number 5, which is, and this was, okay. This representative came from Representative Parker, was to create a parent community board with limited authority over a set of shared education issues across CCPS or public charter schools. It would mean the creation of a new board. It would also mean that board would need its own capacity. In the comment section, it says, why and how is this board different from SBOE? I understand that the proposed board that just oversees DCPS will have different authority than SBOE, but not sure how the authorities are different. Oh, I'm clicking on the shared screen like that's gonna make a difference. It's not. Let me click on my own screen. The types.
It's my comment. It's really just the question of, I don't understand how that citywide policy board would be different from our citywide policy board, and why you would create a new board to handle those authorities. So it's a question.
No, okay, so I appreciate that. I couldn't tell based on the, what do you call? The editing of the document, whose comment it was. So I didn't want to assume, so I was just lifting it up for visibility. I will say I am least prepared to discuss this recommendation because I don't fully understand it. And when I say fully understand, I think I understand the what Representative Parker is trying to accomplish in value. I don't think I understand exactly which responsibilities he would see moving, and I was trying to gain some understanding around where the community boards would sit in the structure. And so I feel least fully equipped to engage around this one or to provide rationale. I will say for number 6, which is a citywide board, and I'm going to make some assumptions here. I think that these are similar things, but probably different approaches. My guess is you would not create both. You would create probably one or the other. A citywide board, which is more of a, I'm calling local board, and local meaning a more traditional school board, would then oversee operations like of DCPS and facilities issues, that person or those persons, I would include like management of the chancellor, the budget for DCPS, oversight of facilities, very, very similar actually to a reconstituted local school board. I make an assumption here that the highest ideal for democracy for these people would be elected and have represent each board, but would be open to some type of what do you call hybrid board, where maybe some are elected, some are appointed by the mayor or another body, given that would be essentially stripping the mayor of the local powers she has. Because one of the things I've heard very clearly is that currently the mayor is the same person who essentially like makes decisions for DCPS in a lot of ways, oversees DCPS and OSSI and other entities that will have oversight functions. And so this was an attempt to separate that out. But I don't want to, so that is my context behind the citywide board, with the understanding that the state board would still retain the state functions it has, and the mayor essentially would, retain some of the power she has with responsibility, like being able to appoint OSSI superintendent and other things are the assumptions here. So that I'm going to stop talking. But I'm just going to bunch the reactions for both of these ideas together because I do think they're similar but different.
Well, I'll just say I totally get that there could be, and I'd be supportive of some board that was able to sort of oversee input, whatever, to DCPS. That's different from us. That's, I guess, what you're calling local.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes sense. And, maybe that could be a hybrid so that it's partly elected, but it's also partly the mayor, or I could see different ways of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
For DCPS.
That's
So
what this recommendation says. It does not mention charters, and if that would be a change for charters. Honestly, for me, I just had some questions about, like, I still don't know, and would need some actually legal feedback around the charter law federally and like whatever. So that's why I left that out of it, because I don't want, sometimes I know what I don't know. Other times I might get in over my head, but I do wonder what that would mean as far as like the congressional authorities, which is also.
Yeah. So sorry. I'm just saying for DCPS, that makes sense for me.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. For charters, I think I don't know enough to make a recommendation about that. But I do feel having some sort of community-like board, maybe even hybrid, that deals with DCPS local things, that makes some sense. On the statewide issues, then that's where I don't understand what it would deal with that's different than what the state board deals with.
When you say the statewide, so like so based on these recommendations as they're written so far, most of these recommendations retain the they keep they expand our authority, but they, as far as like our power to say we want this now, or we're going to initiate those types of things, but they actually don't expand our purview over different types of education issues. And currently the state board does not deal with budget for DCPS or like oversight of facilities. And this would retain that, the board or the state board still would not deal with that this local board would close those feedback loops. So parents would be able to have a place, or teachers or other people can have a place to go and say, hey, my school's budget is this, go to a local elected board, they could close the loop on that. And the state board would still retain the functions it has with expanded, authority to initiate, request data, those types of things. So you would have both.
As I read the recommendations, we're adding 2 new boards. And we
Yeah.
already have one, so that's 3 boards. That's where I'm getting lost.
Oh, no, oh, yes, okay, so I'm, how do I put this? My assumption is that we would add, instead of 2 new boards, we would probably add 1 board. I don't think we would do both. For me, that seems redundant and that would seem super confusing. So my preference would be to create 1 new board, but that's my singular preference. I did not want to, because we had not discussed any of these recommendations. We had not taken anything out, even though some of these things could possibly be in conflict. So I see Darren's hand. But I hope that answers your question, Ruth. So I left both with the assumption we would discuss both and decide which recommendations to advance. Or we left both.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I mean, I want to hear from Zach, but to me, just what you said, I can see the reason for the DCPS board. I'm not clear on the other board.
Yeah, I think the other
And
thing,
two boards make sense, 3 not necessarily.
well, yeah, I think the other thing here for me that I had a question about, because I know Representative Parker referenced just how it works in New York. But New York actually, is a much bigger city than ours, clearly. I hate to say that out loud, just out of DC pride, but it's a much bigger city than ours as far as what one borough is even compared to DC. But also like the charter question, as far as like how charters fit into our governance, and where would you divide the community lines becomes a question. I know it's something we fight about every 10 years with like the ANCs, but I'll lean on my experience from a Ward 7 perspective. I think of a school like Anacostia or even Eastern, where many of our, by virtue of the boundaries, those are very much Ward 7 schools from a population perspective, because their Ward 7 students are in boundary from them. From a ward perspective or community perspective, those lines don't necessarily line up in the same way that the population does. And so like, I have never, officially represented Anacostia, either as the Ward 7 rep or in my Ward 7 Ed Council capacity. But I have always paid attention to Anacostia, was involved in the redesign, care about Anacostia, will support Anacostia informally, and that's my neighborhood school, but Anacostia is in Ward 8. So how would you, like, it creates some of the same tensions that you get into with like ANCs or even like wards, where you're just like, where do you draw the lines? So that's also something that's kind of rolling around in my head. And you would have to create community boards, means you would create several boards. You wouldn't create one. You could, like, this could be 8, or this might be, or something. So I don't know.
I mean, I just think we don't know enough to make, and haven't discussed enough to make any kind of detailed recommendations, but to put it at a higher level, I'm supportive of.
But those are my questions about that one. What I could appreciate, which is something that might not be a governance change, but might just be a best practice kind of thing, is if there were almost like community advisory groups that the state board or this local board or other education agencies assemble, just like we have like a student advisory committee, which is not like legislated in governance kind of ways. But I do think it's a really good practice as far as remaining grounded in the stakeholders you serve. So I really appreciate that value. But I'm not so sure it's like a governance recommendation per se, or governance change. It could be something we just list as a best practice or something too. So apologies for not being able to completely
So I
channel
guess if you're
Representative Parker here.
asking-
but-
oh, okay.
No, go ahead, Representative Wattenberg.
Oh. No, I mean, I guess again, I'm not looking at them in writing, but as I understand it, it sounds like the first one, neither of us understands or is necessarily for, but the one that's for creating some sort of boards. I put board paren, that deals with specific DCPS issues. Makes some sense. So I could support that, but the other one doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah,
And I'm not asking for you to respond to that. I'm just saying that's how I could see going forward at this
Yeah.
point.
No, well, I guess I'm gonna only respond with a clarification because I'm gonna make sure I heard you correctly. Did you say create citywide board, possibly in parentheses boards?
If you have an independent board that's
Uh-huh.
overseeing part of DCPS,
Mhm.
I think part of what you're raising, is it one board or is it one for each community? I don't think we know. That's why I'm saying board, S.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I heard that. I think I was kind of coupling together recommendation 5, which is like the community boards, which is plural, versus one local board. I'm assuming it will be one board that would oversee DCPS as opposed to 8 boards. Because I don't even know how that would, especially you give them management responsibilities, how that could work. I think that gets super.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't, insofar, that's fine. I mean, I'm just saying insofar as people are proposing more than one, maybe they're not. I don't feel like we're that far in our thinking. Should it be one? Should it be a few? I don't know. That's all I'm saying. There should be something
Okay,
that deals with DCPS. That's all I'm trying to say.
okay, so you're saying you could support
And
either, like one board or multiple, you haven't. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
provided it's DCPS, provided it's
Provided it's
DCPS, yeah.
DCPS specific,
Yeah,
got it.
yeah, and
Darren, was that a purposeful hand?
Yeah, I put it back down, but maybe I can ask this. When it comes to community feedback on these,
Mhm.
maybe thinking of how someone from the public can look at this and without being part of this conversation, understand
Mhm.
items that might like these boards, they might either interpret it differently or just not know where to start with those, just how you all might think of tackling that issue of receiving meaningful feedback from the public. And then 2, maybe just like use, as mentioned earlier, just like using this as a starting point, as like an exploratory measure. But I don't know if I'm introducing a can of worms here or what, but the main thing is just what language or notes could be added to these, to numbers like 5 and 6. Or if there even should be, or if it's just intentionally like leaving it vague and open for like further exploration down the road.
I mean, speaking for me, I'm not for proposing an additional board that oversees issues that cross the 2 sectors. I don't understand the purpose of that. I am for something like, you call it a DCPS policy board, or
Mhm.
a board to oversee DCPS policies and to raise issues, sort of a public venue, where people raise things and they get answered
Yeah.
or addressed.
So I agree with Representative Wattenberg, and for a couple of different reasons that I'm not gonna go back into just by virtue of time. But if we kept our protocol for like voting out of committee, I would not advance recommendation. I would not vote to advance recommendation 5 at this point, because I have questions around like, can you even create boards across public and charter in this way? As far as some of the things he's saying it should would like facilities and those things, but also I favor one place for parents to go for a bunch of different reasons. So that would be my 2 cents. I think the question around like what language do we provide for the public is an important one. I see Representative Patterson said agreed. So it sounds like we're actually not going to advance recommendation 5 from the committee.
And it was for those very reasons, Madam Chair, in this particular committee, for those reasons, because it's very hard to do those type of committees across because of the differences in the LEAs and how they're governed and how they're also looked at, how they're attended to in certain areas. So that's why I'm in agreement.
Yeah, I would also just say from a user standpoint, like, I just know so many of my families have kids in variety awards, all the things. And I don't want them to continue to run into the problem of who do I go to? Like, am I standing in front of the right board? Because they send their kids to one kid to a Ward 6 school and one kid to a Ward 7 school. I want them to be able to have a central place. So, and when I think about our takeaways, like those things seemed important. So it sounds like we would not advance recommendation 5. It also sounds like we would need to take a vote on recommendation 6, which is to create a citywide board. And Darren, I hear your question, which is, I guess, one we should talk about, and I know we're at 4 o'clock, but one we should talk about more broadly as far as how much detail for each recommendation, and what context do we need to provide, or language where do we need to think about accessibility of language for the public. But for the purposes of like us, and we would have 7, 8, 9. We only have a couple more. So I think we can kind of push through them.
Yep.
Yeah. So for number 6, it sounds like for number 5, I just want to recap: create parent community boards plural, with limited authority over a set of shared education issues across DCPS and charter. All in favor say aye.
No, that's the
Okay.
one we're saying.
Wait,
no
any
to.
opposed? No, Ruth, I got it. Any opposed?
Okay.
Say nay.
Okay.
I would be a nay. Representative Patterson, I see a thumbs down. Representative Wattenberg, this is your chance for the no.
Yeah, nay.
Okay, so no. Now, because I just wanted to stay consistent, sorry. And then recommendation 6, create a citywide board that oversees DCPS operations and facilities. All in favor say aye. I would be an aye.
I'm an aye, but I think the globalness of that needs to be worked through a bit.
Yeah, no, I
I
understand.
mean,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, there's more to it than facilities, and there's less to it than all operations and facilities. That's all.
Okay, so I think I hear an aye as far as the spirit
Yes.
with the, yes, aye.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't
yes.
even ask no opposed, no abstentions. Here's probably the easiest one, you guys. Number 7, create a centralized website education governance hub, along with a system to map, track, and close constituent education issues. There's also a note here about there will be, in addition to a website, a hotline. The thought is this will be housed actually in the office of the student advocate, because currently those types of materials are housed there, with a hotline to track and close feedback loops actually housed in the office of the ombudsman. So those would be the places we would dedicate that to. There is a horizon as far as out years to like create this and dedicate staff towards it. So I'm going to stop there and get immediate feedback.
I'm for that, especially with the hotline. I'm glad you added that. The one thing I would add, and I think it's mainly, great to have it at the OSA ombudsman, because that's sort of what they do, is help people navigate.
Mhm.
I do think that as we discussed at the meeting, sometimes what people want is they don't want to navigate, they want to get something done. And in that case, I just think at least we need to get, it needs to also come to the board. I just don't want to trap all of that stuff in 2 independent offices and we never get it. I mean, it's a little point just to be dealt with maybe as it gets written.
When you say to the, so like I would, here's some, I'm gonna be honest about my assumptions here. I would assume just like the other work for OSA and ombuds, those things would get reported out in their annual reports. And they could still have functions like testifying at council or be invited to present at board meetings, or how we currently take them to the meeting with Mendelsohn to raise systemic issues.
All I'm saying is that maybe the hotline should also, that it's important for board members to know what's coming in on the hotline. That's all I'm always saying.
Okay. 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 So if there are no other thoughts around this, can we, all in favor of number 7, please,
Aye.
all right, aye. Third aye is unanimous. I'm assuming there are no opposed and no abstentions. All right, number 8, increase state board budget for greater capacity to compensate for wider state board roles and authority. Oh, this is new. I like it. And the notes here are,
Can you read that again? I'm sorry.
yes, increase state board budget for greater capacity to compensate for wider state board roles and authority. So this seems rolled up. I don't know if this came from like our staff or where 8 came from, but it it seems to more fully encompass the places where, as the board gets more authority, we would need more capacity. I think it just calls that out explicitly. I would offer, this also could be interpreted as increased state board, like salary for board members too. Like if someone just read this with no, and there is no context here, and there are no notes here. But like,
Again, for me, this isn't a make or break, but I think the better way to do it would not be as a recommendation per se, but to sort of part of the closing piece is, as the board takes on more authority over time, it will surely need more capacity in terms of staff and board member time, as opposed to making it like a recommendation on the same, same level of importance as those others. Again, it's just
like,
how do you write it?
yeah, I want to make sure I'm, I hear where you're coming from. I think I hear where you're coming from, but it's just like, this is a more cross-cutting thing altogether. And so maybe it's not a standalone recommendation, but it is something that would need to be noted as far as just like what would,
Yeah.
right? Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, noted, raised, but and it needs to be worked out as we work through these others.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Darren, I see your hand.
There's 2 questions about that, about number 8.
Mhm.
This ultimately will be translated into a resolution, is that correct?
Yes, we would have to pass a resolution at some point.
And so therefore be it resolved, and then maybe add that as a therefore.
We could do it that way, yes.
And then number 2,
No, I would not do it. You're saying that therefore more staff, therefore we need more staff?
Well, like therefore, the following things will be true, like, well, and I guess we don't have to talk about,
I think,
but like, I think what I hear Darren saying is he's trying to solve for where you want to put it, which we don't have to solve for exactly now. But, and Darren, correct me if I'm wrong. What I hear you saying is you are solving for Representative Wattenberg note about this is dependent on what other recommendations we decide. And so like, based on the things we decide, we will have to work through adding capacity and other things. And so you were asking if like, that might be one way, like and again, maybe this is not the thing we need to get into right now, but I think I hear you trying to solve for what she is describing.
No, that's exactly right. It's
Mhm.
instead of it being an item, it would be, here's a list of recommendations, and then among the therefores, it'd be like, all right, looking above, these would need to be, there need to be compensation or the ability to build capacity to achieve these things.
Mhm.
And then just one other note is that at tonight's SAC meeting, they would be seeing this. Is that
Yeah.
correct? Okay.
Correct, because we don't have a resolution drafted yet.
And for those listening in the public, it would be the Student Advisory Committee, SAC. Sorry
Okay.
about that.
So is it fair to say that we agree with the spirit of this, and as we move to drafting the resolution, we will have further discussion about how best to reflect this?
And when are we gonna do that?
What do you mean?
I mean, I agree.
Yeah, I think this is part of the wordsmithing. And so for me, this would be part of the wordsmithing of the resolution. Because I hear what you're saying. So that makes sense. That makes sense to me. So how about this for consistency and process? Maybe we put in the notes, just like, this is true. You know, we would use this as context or some language around, based on the other recommendations, we would need to evaluate this over time or something. And so that we know that it is language that is advancing out of the committee, we should still do the yay or the nay. Does that work for like the now? And then I want to move to the last couple ones, because I know Representative Patterson said he had an hour, which was over 10 minutes ago.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can, like, I definitely hear what you're saying, and I think we should solve for it. So I'm gonna do I'm gonna read it again. Increase state board budget for greater capacity to compensate for wider state board roles and authority. All in favor of this idea, please say yay. I'm a yay.
Yeah,
Okay. Representative Patterson, let us know where you are. And then any opposed? Any abstentions? I got a yay from Representative Patterson. Okay, next one. The state board appoints the state superintendent for education. Note, this would be in lieu of the mayor's appointment. And this says years, it would require a transition period. Because I would assume that we would not be appointing a new superintendent, hopefully anytime soon. So I want to open that one up for discussion.
So this is Ruth. I mean, I've been for this. I think on this one, it's just very, again, it's very important to have a rationale and to talk about checks and balances and to talk about how in no other situation is the superintendent responsible simultaneously to effectively the district superintendent and the state governor, right? You always have sort of two different bodies that are looking at this data, and we don't. So I think it's really important to say this in a way that it's not about a power grab. It's about, this is really not a functional, healthy circumstance.
Okay. Representative Patterson, any thoughts? I have some thoughts. Okay, I don't see any movement in square. I think this is one of the ones where I would want more clarity. So like right now, the mayor makes the appointment, the council confirms. I don't know if this means that the state board would appoint and the council confirms. I don't know if we would want to change it and say the mayor appoints and we confirm. Yeah, I feel like there are different ways for this to shift in authority, but I also would want some clarity around like who appoints, who confirms, because I think you need both functions, is my initial thought here. Representative Patterson, I see your hand.
Yes, on this particular matter, because I've seen it in so many different ways, and I appreciate questions that you asked around clarity, but also even if the mayor appoints and the council kind of confirms, would we be responsible, like, were the person to come up for another term or the things like that? Evaluation, you know, or that, could we fire, you know, for cause? Those things are the type of things that is like, so what actually does report to me? You know, I know it could possibly mean the shift in dynamics that we've talked about as far as us being able to initiate policy and those type of things like that, as well. But I kind of want to get some understanding of what does report to mean. And, you know, along the same lines that you're saying, if the mayor appoints and say the council confirms, then what happens with us as far as that person reporting to us?
Well, the one thing I would note, excuse me, is this recommendation actually does not mention reporting. It just says appoints.
Okay, points. Okay.
And so, yeah. But
Okay.
I mean, you could assume that like
Yeah, but
appoints means reports to.
yeah,
Right?
so I,
And so like those
same-
are, yeah. So I hear where you're coming from
Yeah.
with the questions, but I want to,
yeah,
yeah.
I appreciate part two. And I think it falls in line with that because, you know, you and I as fellows, we kind of field these questions, you know, for the school board fellowship. We field these questions a lot on the emails that we see because they're talking about the same issues. And so I want a little bit more clarity in that area because even appoints can be ambiguous in a sense. I know it does say, okay, we appoint, does it approve, whatever, but it also means what happens after the appointment.
Yeah.
So my input on this would be that what we are talking about is that the board appoints and the council confirms, just to get back to Ebony Rose's first question. I think what we mean is state board appoints, council confirms. And that I believe is the language that was used in the initial Mary Cheh bill and in the subsequent Robert White and Janice bill. It does not talk about reporting. I think that is something that is a longer discussion. I don't think we have to deal with it right here. I mean, it's just not, we don't have that level of, you know, research done, but we can take that first piece. And then as Jacques says, there's a lot, you know, there's a lot of wiggle room in there as to what that would mean. And I think of that as, okay, that's the discussion. But the governance relationship is SBOE appoints, council confirms.
So, and if I may again, so that would that be basically the same way in how we interview for our executive director? We go through that whole process and that's, it is that part, but it just ends at appointment. Is that what we're saying?
For now, although I think the process would be different than just hiring a staff person. I mean, I think it would involve just as sort of the council, well, let me think. I think it would involve the whole board in a larger way. I think that's typically how it does get handled when a board does that. So I don't want to pick that as the model, but to your other point, yes, it's sort of being quiet on the other stuff.
Okay, thank you.
I would say for me, like, this is the one where given some of the other changes, I probably have the least, what do you call? Strong of an opinion about. Like, I could be, not so much that I would like vote against it, but like, I think some of the other changes as far as like us, our ability to initiate, the request of the data, get at some of the things I feel like some of the other legislation has been trying to solve. And in addition to the other governance changes. And I do want to lean a little bit more into like the appointment versus reporting relationship and like what that would mean. But I would say I feel probably honestly the least strong about this recommendation at this point.
So I would just say, to me, it matters a lot. It speaks to some different issues than we've talked about tonight. It really does get at this checks and balances issue in a way I think the others don't. They do a little bit, but not in the same way. This is the one that gets at having an OSSI that's independent from the mayor, which I think is critical. And by the way, I think there's a lot of support on the council for that. So I think that really is because people have talked about that independence relationship and that checks and balances, I think it's an opening for some of these other discussions. And none of the others really deal with that.
Can I push back a little bit on that? And Ruth, maybe you can give me some understanding on that. And I'll say, because I recently sat in some interviews, and so in those interviews, we had a hiring manager. So for me, this feels a lot like we're the hiring managers as a group, the state board. But after that, we don't have a lot to say. And so that's where I guess I went on a riff and started asking about reporting, for the simple fact, if we're talking about checks and balances, to me personally, being able to appoint somebody or to hire, however the terminology we want to use, does not change checks and balances, because that person still, if the reporting or anything like that is not changed and stuff like that, the authority still relies basically, because they're the mayor, they're working for the mayor basically. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, then let me clarify, because no, they're not reporting to the mayor. They're reporting to us. I'm just saying, I mean, they no longer have a relationship to the mayor. It is an independent operation. What I was saying was, I don't think we need to now flesh out what reporting means. In other words, when you hire a superintendent, and this is true with all of these kind of appointments, right? The board is not going to oversee, how many coffee cups are ordered. It's like you're giving the superintendent a lot of leeway, but you're also retaining some oversight and policy direction. Exactly where you draw that line, I don't know. I don't think we know enough. That's all I was trying to say, is I think, oh yeah, but they're reporting to us for sure. They're not reporting to the mayor. They're what's the right word? They're responsible to us, and, could be removed, at the end of a term or for cause.
So this doesn't.
But we're having the regular conversation with them.
I do want to be clear that as this is written, it says the state, and that's why I said it does not say reports. It says the state board appoints the state superintendent of education. And so so like when Representative Patterson raised some of the questions, he says, that's why I was like, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't say that. And I do think that would be a conversation we need to have. Because changing the power to appoint is different than changing the power to report. Like, you could even say the mayor appoints, the council confirms, and the person will report to the SBOE. I actually, I don't feel I don't feel discomfort with given the local functions will be separated out, because I do distinguish will be separated out from the mayor, because right now, essentially the mayor has both, assuming they would be separated out, right? Right now, the mayor has all the local stuff, so we'll oversee DCPS, because I do remember when like some of these bills started and people were up in arms about what was happening at Blue and some of the data things, and they were saying essentially the same people who are in charge of like hiring and firing and all the things and producing, who the people who produce the data are the same people who would oversee, the quality of the data. And that, for me, that would no longer be true, because you would have essentially a local board that is removed from the mayor. If that's true, I actually feel less strongly about the mayor, the state superintendent not being part of the mayor's cabinet. I would also say that there are some states where the governor actually does appoint the state superintendent. And I think of the mayor kind of like the governor. I think the state board could also serve the function of appointing the state superintendent, because I think the state board also also serves as a state level body. But I do want to be very careful about conflating appoint versus report. They are different.
Exactly. And if I might say, that is something that I've been wrestling with. So as it's written, without getting too much into the weeds, I'm not so much in favor as it's written, because it does not flesh out totally what happens after the appointment, where authority, lies as far as who they're reporting to. So I tend to be honest, I don't like to piecemeal things. I would like to have the full story on this particular one, and this does not give me the full story at this particular time.
So can I just say, I mean, I think we're asking for a lot more on this one than we are on the other ones. I think let me say two things. First of all, to go back to Ebony Rose's point, yeah, but where governors appoint the state commissioner, they're not also appointing the local commissioner. That's where you get it kind of a problem here. And I really don't agree with this idea that, if there's going to be a local board, therefore we don't need the independence at the state level. The state level is where you get sort of the oversight of the data. I mean, typically, routinely across the country, that is how it works. So I really don't want to say it doesn't matter to separate out, make the state superintendent independent from the mayor. I think it's hugely important. And I also think, Jacques, we can switch the words, we can add report back in. The other thing we could say is to say something that is, the superintendent should be named by the board, approved by the council, and terminated for a cause or at the end of a term, and the role of the, you could, and once you say that, I think it's obvious that they're reporting to the board. That's how these things work. But you could also say, and have a relationship between the board and the state superintendent, similar to other state boards, and leave it at that, subject to some research, because obviously we don't have a full research, but same with the others. I mean, we're saying we think this is the way to go. Details, we're not giving you the details now, because that's going to be a collegial joint process. But we could say that it would be similar, if you feel that's needed, Jacques, to say it would be similar to how it works in, in other states. And there's a range, would fall within the range of what is true in other states, and leave it at that. That does it, so it's not wide open. It's not like we're going to invent something brand new and have some level of control that nobody's ever seen, but it's going to be in this range that others have.
And I'm trying to take in what you're saying, Representative Wattenberg, and not make it as convoluted as it's coming across to me, because like when I was on Housing Finance Agency, the mayor appointed the chair of the Housing Finance Agency. They were what we call quasi-autonomous, so to speak. The board actually ran the Housing Finance Agency, and that was it. We, that executive director reported to us. So then they had to listen to the board. This sounds very convoluted to me, because people have different responsibilities, and I still see it as the way that it's described currently, that the superintendent still reports to, although, we have some say-so over their reappointment and everything like that, they still report to and are part of DME and that reports to the mayor.
Yeah, I don't think that is what it says. I mean, I just think it's not clear, but it should be the superintendent is appointed by the state board, approved by the council, reports to the state board. I mean, I don't think it needs to be, I mean, that's what has been in these other proposals. That's what's in Janice's bill. It's what's in the Janice and Robert bill. It's what I think was in the first Mary Chey bill.
I see Darren's hand, so I'm gonna recognize Darren because I know I talk a lot.
Well, was Jock Jock, were you first with your hand?
Jock just finished talking.
Okay, I didn't know if like it went back up. When it comes to the superintendent reports to the state board, could that be rolled into 1 and 2 in terms of requesting data and initiating policies?
No,
So
they're
I
not the
think
same.
this.
Or is
but
it
it's not-
different?
it's not the same, but this was one of the reasons I said, given some of the other changes, I do think that, and I'm not saying fully, but I do think some of these recommendations address some of the ability to just like have separate out, right? Like I think those things are particularly important. My guess is if somebody reports directly to you, you wouldn't even need the other things. That would be my guess. But I also I do my best not to take much for granted. I don't, and I do want to clarify. It's not that I'm saying this is not an important conversation. I'm saying that I don't feel I don't have as strong a sense, and it's not based on previous conversations. Like I've seen the other bills, but I've not completely agreed with those other bills, and it has not been in any of our documents that it says appoints and reports to. I am, and I actually probably could be more comfortable with appoint than report to at this point, because I do, and I think it's because I would need to think about what are the pros and cons of what it would mean for the person not to be a cabinet official. I think the things I'm most concerned about for accountability purposes are addressed in 1 and 2 above, and I haven't given the appropriate consideration around other things, which is not to say they're not important, but it's as far as my sense of like just like when we were talking through the recommendation 5, and I was like, I don't have a strong as sense of this, which is different than saying like, I don't think something is important. But I do want to recognize where I probably need to do a little more like thinking and homework. So I want
And
that.
are you prepared? Are you prepared to do that in time for this resolution, or you're saying?
Well,
not in
given
this
the amount of
timeline?
work I've put into this so far, I'm always prepared to do some homework, Representative Wattenberg. I think, right, like if for the purposes of like this today, I'm more comfortable with a point, but I would not be comfortable with like, if you asked me to vote on this today, as far as a point and report, I would vote no, because I don't know. I always want to know what my vote means. If you asked, would I be willing to advance out of the committee, a point in conversation about some of the other things? Yes. But this is also not, again, like for me, some of the other things, I just have a stronger sense of. So I don't know if that's helpful, but
I mean, that's fine. I mean, no, I mean, I think it's the first important thing is the appointment. I mean, and then would you also say then that's the authority that would be able to terminate for cause? And would you go that far? I mean, I think the point, I mean, the main thing is the board is appointing that person, and they can't be pushed out except for by the board, or I'd even say the council, but the point is to be independent from the mayor. The mayor's office can't push you out. So I would go with just a point. If that's what you want to do. And certainly for, at this moment, that would work for me.
Okay, so I also was supposed to have a hard stop at 4:30. Because I was trying to get as close to 90 minutes as we can, but it's 4:33. And I absolutely have to go to the next thing. I want to call for the vote on the existing language. With the, and also with the recognition that these are the things coming out of the committee. And it would, and there would be more homework and discussion because the rest of the board has to weigh in. We are not the majority of the board. Number 9, the state board appoints the state superintendent of education. Note that this will be in lieu of the mayor's appointment. And that horizon would be one over several years as described here. All in favor, please say aye.
I think it should say confirmed by the council. I think that was there.
That, no, it's not here.
Okay,
That's
well, I would
I
recommend
read
putting
what was
that in.
here.
Okay, I'd recommend putting that in.
Okay, so I'm gonna start over. The state board appoints the state superintendent of education with confirmation by the council. This will be
Yeah,
in
that's
lieu
what-
of the
that's what I
mayor's
would recommend.
appointment. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'll say aye for the appointment. All opposed? Representative Patterson, where are you? Up or down or abstain?
I'm really having a hard time with this because it's so convoluted and it's not clear to me. It's sense to me. What's the vote right now, please?
So, and again, this is to advance out of the committee. 2, in favor of advancing the conversation out of the committee.
Okay, I'll add the third vote to advance it out of committee.
Okay, because we're trying, like, I want to be clear about where we are in the process. And right now it is it's what are the things that will go in front of the full board?
And I appreciate that you give me that clarity as far as coming out of committee to go in front of the full board where we can have more discussion on it, because I'm unclear just what this does as far as appointment, and I'll have to look at it a little bit more and see what else comes out of the whole. So, but thank you. I'm okay with it. I'm an aye for out of committee.
No, I mean, that's fair because I do like, here's what our other colleagues have to weigh in too. So let's not pretend that we can't benefit from them weighing in. Okay, so those are the 9. It is 4:36.
I'm sorry, what I had
I
one in
wanna-
there.
I want to
I'm sorry, there was one more in.
Okay, I want to note that there are 2 more that I actually think Representative Wattenberg added. One was create a structure independent of DCPS. I could hear termination appeals. And the other one was the board should conduct hearings, focus groups, other surveys. I want to give a voiceover. For the 11th one, Darren moved this down and out, and like he moved this down because these are functions we already do. And we're not need a governance change. For the 10th one, I know you have raised this more than once. And based on the conversation at the working session, it seemed like there was not broad support for this. We can vote on it as a committee, but we tried to integrate where people had support. I think that Darren had updated this to see if maybe like the creation of a labor ombudsman could be, but I don't see that anymore. So I guess there might have been some changes last night. I do need to leave because I have to be somewhere at 5 o'clock, and then I have to go to the student advisory committee meeting. So I'm happy to let the conversation continue. But the 11th one, and I'm curious if people would agree. We literally took that out because those are functions we already have and would keep.
Oh, that's fine. That's
Mhm.
fine. That can go. But I do think there should be the independent, a place where people from DCPS can go to have their appeal their terminations. It's very odd that we don't have it. I think that's very unique and wrong in DC and leads to bad things. It could be to the SBOE, it could be to somewhere else. And I think there was only one comment on it, which was Zachary wondering how it worked in other places. I think that was the only comment. It wasn't like there was a lot of discussion. So I would recommend leaving it in, and there can be a fuller discussion, but it's really a problem.
So when we talked about it at the working session, I noted, and I think Representative Patterson noted, so I'm uncomfortable with this living at the SBOE level for a whole bunch of different reasons. I am more comfortable with the idea of like an ombudsman or something to handle that. I totally appreciate the spirit of, and I'll use my aunt as an example because she's been very vocal about being someone who has felt pushed out of DCPS about where this will go. I personally don't think it would be at the SBOE level. I do think,
It's fine with me.
and so so I guess the filter we used was based on so what I heard was, here's what we heard at the working session based on the notes. There were several people who raised concerns with this. Jessica, I think Representative Sutter raised the question of, could it be an ombudsman thing? It was kind of unclear if that was a possible solution or not. So we couldn't say, okay, there was point to broader evidence of consensus. So that's why this was like this. So I wanted to give voice over to those things.
So what I would suggest, because I think this is consistent with the feedback and what you're saying now, is to indicate the need for it and to be open about the place. It could be the board, or don't put the board. It could be the Attorney General's office. It could be a public relations board. I don't think it can be the ombudsman, because the ombudsman only gets to kind of mediate. So I don't think that's the
Not
right
our
place.
ombudsman, but sorry, not the, it was her recommendation, I believe, was to create a new office for like labor, like education labor or something, which I'm also not convinced, but so it's not, I just want to be clear, it wouldn't be Serena's office, it would be a new office.
Yeah, so I would just say there needs to be an independent place for this. And we could name some names and just leave it at that. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, I see. Representative Patterson put in the chat, he wants the SBOE to stay in the policy lane, not venture into adjudication. I'm comfortable, and I absolutely am leaving in 1 minute. Because I have to. But I'm comfortable with figuring out how to reference this as something that came up. I also want us to have in our recommendations of where we put things. I could see, and I would be, and we can research like OAG, like maybe that's a separate thing, but as it is now, I'm honestly just not quite sure what to do with it. But I could be open to that idea, Representative Wattenberg, of like, how is this something we address? Because I think it's important.
Well, what about if we recommend that it's something important and we encourage either the next board or the council to determine where such an independent forum could be?
I'm comfortable with that.
Because I do.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
So am I.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
So in the resolution, there would be a recommendation section and maybe an exploratory section for the next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or the council, right? Like where something.
Recommending that
like
somebody,
yeah.
Okay.
I'm totally comfortable with that. I think that makes sense.
I mean, we are for there being an independent place. We are leaving for a next discussion, perhaps of a different body, where it should be.
I believe everybody is, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think everybody's in that vein, that it needs to be something independent that can't be politically pressed.
All right, so I'm gonna call a vote
that's all good.
so I can go, because I have to go.
Okay.
Sorry, literally I have to go.
So
So can we call for the vote on noting an exploratory item of a independent forum where I would say, can we just say education labor grievances can be addressed?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially terminations. I wouldn't make it broader than that. I mean, I think it's about
Okay,
terminations.
terminations. I was
Or,
gonna
or
give
it
it
could
a
be,
little,
I mean, you can make it broader about evaluations, but yeah.
I wouldn't like to venture into that either. I think we keep
Okay.
it there.
terminations. Y'all don't feel me on that. I'm leaving.
Right.
Terminations. All
Termination.
right, all in favor of that? Please
Aye.
say aye.
Mhm. Yes.
I heard a from Representative Patterson and Representative Wattenberg. Terminations?
Yep.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, great,
Aye.
because I didn't want to leave and then it'd be like, oh no, we don't have a quorum, we can't advance it, because I felt like the discussion was good. So,
Madam
at
Chair,
the things, we're gonna advance out of the committee. I'm gonna leave because I absolutely have to.
and that's what.
And those recommendations are
Sure.
gonna go to the SAC right now?
They're gonna go to the SAC at 5 o'clock. I have one appointment before I make the
Okay.
SAC at 5 o'clock. But these recommendations will go to the SAC. Yes,
Great, thank you. Great
Motion.
meeting, great discussion.
thank you. Thank you all very much. I will see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.